What's up, everyone, and welcome into another episode of Wizards Latest. I'm your host and DC sports fan, Ben Robertson, and on this page, we break down all the biggest headlines surrounding the Washington Wizards. So make sure you like and subscribe down below. Drop your comments with any thoughts you might have on the video or anything you want to hear me talk about in the future. As always, guys, I appreciate all of the support. We are closing in on 500 subscribers here on the page. Once again, thank you so much for tuning in every single day. Today, I want to talk about the Wizards bringing back Anthony Gill, how this will impact the roster. I want to talk about Tristan Vukcevic absolutely hooping for Team Serbia as they get ready for the EuroBasket 2025 tournament. And lastly, it looks like Alex Sarr and Bilal Koulibaly are going to be on that final Team France roster. Again, EuroBasket tourney 2025 approaching later this month. Once again, guys, thank you for tuning in every single day. The Wizards have brought back Anthony Gill. The 32-year-old has been with the team since 2020. Remember, he had stints in Russia and Turkey before that. That was following his college playing career at the University of South Carolina. And then, of course, a lot of DC fans became familiar with him with his time at UVA. He was released earlier this offseason, and really, I mentioned at the time I wouldn't be shocked to see Gill brought back to the roster, a player that just everybody in the organization has positive things to say about, whether it's management, right on down to the coaching staff. Everybody just seems to love Anthony, and he's going to be able to bring a element of leadership and an element of, just veteran experience that, well, I know it sounds cliche, is just so critically important to the just learning process of some of the young players. And so many NBA legends have talked about throughout, NBA history, how some of the veterans that they were surrounded by earlier in their careers were really huge assets for them. The one surprise here may be is that it does put Washington back up over the limit of standard contracts. Believe this will now be a 16th standard roster contract, one over the 15-man limit, which means that, of course, moves are going to be made here as the offseason progresses. Somebody is going to have to be waived or cut, or potentially a trade agreement reached. I think the most likely option is that one of those guys, sort of on the bubble of the roster, is moved on from. Of course, the name sort of everybody, kind of keying in on after, the news of Anthony Gill's re-signing comes out are Dylan Jones and Malachi Branham, sort of the guys that are sitting right there on the bubble, it feels like, of this roster. My probably take there, or the guy that I think is more likely, if it is one of those two, would be Dylan Jones to be moved. I know he had a really nice close to the summer league, but I'm not sure he's just shown enough there. And then the other thing, kind of my reasoning for that, is that Malachi Branham, just quite simply, remember, was traded for here this offseason. Remember that deal that sent Kelly Olynyk to San Antonio, brought Malachi Branham, Blake Wesley, and the 2026 second round pick to DC. We've already seen Blake Wesley bought out. I would just kind of be surprised to see if both of the return pieces are, moved on from before the season starts, before they even play in a Washington uniform. I also, you have to remember Chris Middleton still here on the roster. I've thrown him out as a candidate, especially last week. I was talking about, hey, I think if there's no trade agreement reached here for Middleton, look at him as maybe a candidate that's going to be bought out as the offseason progresses. Maybe there's a buyout agreement reached there. And if that happens, of course, the roster back down to 15. No problem bringing in Anthony Gill. Again, I think Gill, just a guy that knows he isn't going to command a ton of minutes. And you have to remember, there's a bunch of different players, young players, fighting for playing time already on the roster. Gill can come in, just get a few minutes off the bench and give some valuable veteran experience and leadership for this young core that is trying to develop here in DC. One of those young players, of course, Tristan Vukcevic. We've talked so much about maybe Alex Sarr, Bilal Koulibaly on Team France as they get ready for the EuroBasket 2025 tournament. But don't forget about Tristan Vukcevic playing for Team Serbia. And before we get into sort of his performances so far in these exhibition outings leading up to the tourney, these friendly matchups, Tristan had a few options really with the international route he could take. Remember, he was born in Italy. He had a Serbian father, a Swedish mother. His father, a Serbian basketball player, played actually for a bunch of the top clubs in Europe. At one point, played himself in the EuroBasket tournament. His mother of Swedish nationality, but Tristan grew up in Greece. That's where he began his basketball career. So there was options there for him where he wanted to play or where he wanted to take his international career, where he wanted to take his route in that regard. He wanted to follow his father's footsteps and play for Team Serbia. And so far, in these sort of friendly exhibitions leading up to the EuroBasket tournament, Tristan has looked really good. Coming into these friendlies, we really weren't sure how much he might play or how much he might be featured in that Serbian squad. And so far, again, like I said, he's been really solid. Of course, the sort of most notable effort that's been swirling on social media, the 24-point performance against Cyprus and a 9 of 13 shooting effort. Again, showed off the touch, I should say, from beyond the arc, made 4 of his 6 three-point attempts. He also had 4 steals in that game. It was a dominant Serbian win, 122 to 55 over Cyprus, but in a game that, of course, had a step up in competition against Greece, Vucevic also played pretty well. He had 7 points in 6 minutes in that matchup, a 10-point victory for Serbia. Obviously, a more challenging opponent, but he was still able to show, he can be a contributor. Next game for Serbia will be against the Czech Republic this Friday, August 15th. Lastly today, and I touched on them already, but Alex Sarr, Bilal Koulibaly looking more and more like they will be on that final Team France roster for the EuroBasket tournament. Of course, Koulibaly coming into really the preparation was expected to have a featured role with that French team. Alex Sarr, after the really good performance, maybe the best individual performance France has had so far against Montenegro, looking like he's going again to make that final roster. France has trimmed their roster down by 3 more players. Frank Ntilikina, Ousmane Dieng, Moussa Diabate, all cut here in the last few days. Obviously, I know Frank didn't work out in the NBA, but when you're cutting NBA level talent, those other two still on rosters, just shows where France has kind of gotten to as a basketball power. You have to imagine 20, 30 years ago, there wasn't some of the international countries, the overseas teams didn't have the option to cut 3 different NBA level players. Now they have an absolute battle for some of their roster spots for a tournament like the Eurobasket tournament. Not even, of course, the highest level there of European competition, but not the highest level of international competition. Of course, not even talking about the Olympics, and they still have a big time roster battle there. Again, looks like Koulibaly and Sarr trending towards being on that final roster. Still 2 more cuts to be made, I believe, for Team France to get down to 12 men. Their next action will be this Thursday, August 14th, taking on Spain in another international friendly as they get ready again for the EuroBasket 2025 tournament. We'll keep you posted on everything Wizards related, whether it's overseas, whether it's right here in the States. Make sure you like and subscribe down below. Drop your comments with any thoughts you might have on the video. And thanks for watching another episode of Wizards Latest.